In this video, we'll start talking about the blood. And if you remember, the blood is a connective tissue where cells are living in extracellular matrix. This extracellular matrix, we'll call it the plasma. So here we are talking about cellular components or cellular elements, and also we are talking about the extracellular matrix. For the cellular elements, we are talking about red blood cells, white blood cells, and the platelets, whereas the extracellular matrix, we'll call it the plasma, which is the fluid part of the blood. Now, as functions of the blood, of course, transporting oxygen and gases. Also, it will help in transporting nutrients, in transporting hormones, wastes. All of those are functions of the blood. Also, it will help in distributing heat. Also, it will help in defenses. Since the white blood cells are there, it will help in stopping blood loss through forming clots. So all of those are different functions of the blood. Also, it will contribute to homeostasis. We talked about the temperature. It will help in regulating water contents, maintaining pH balance. So all of those are general functions of the blood. For the blood, the human blood, we are talking about 5 to 6 liters of blood in males, 4 to 5 liters in females. So we are talking about like 2 gallons of blood between males and females. Blood is a little bit alkaline with pH of 7.4. This will fluctuate from 7.35 to 7.45, 7.45. So that is around, the pH of the blood. The blood is viscous, so it's a thick fluid, and it's colored like red. But however, this red will change from bright to dark red depending on the oxygen level. And we will talk a little bit about this. Now, if I take a tube of blood and spin it, or just let it stand for 24 hours, I will see separation of the components of the blood. I will get the upper portion, which is the plasma. The plasma would form around 55% of the blood. So this will contain water, proteins, nutrients, hormones. The water by itself is around 93% of the plasma. So the majority of the blood technically is water, right? But also we have proteins, hormones, and other stuff. Then we have a very small region. That is something we'll call the puffy coat or the white coat. This is where the white blood cells and the platelets would appear. And then down we have the hematocrit, which is the red blood cells count, or the percentage of red blood cells. Now this, the hematocrit is something that we usually measure through blood work. And it should be like for a normal person between 37% to 45% or to 47% in females. Whereas it's a little bit higher, between 42% to 52% in males. So that is the percentage of the hematocrit in the blood. And of course, those percentage would complete with the plasma to get the 100%. For the plasma, we said 92% of it is water. Also, it contains dissolved substances like ions, solutes, proteins, sugars, amino acids. All of those are dissolved in the plasma and, transported through the plasma. The most important group of those dissolved substances are the proteins. And for the proteins, we have 3 major groups. We have the albumin. Albumin, this is the most abundant type of protein. It will help in transporting amino acids and steroid hormones. And also it will contribute to the osmotic pressure of the blood. This is something we will talk about in the urinary system. So remember the albumin, that we will come back to it, and we will see it again in the urinary system. Then we have the globulin. The globulin are involved in immunity or in the immune system. Those are proteins that will attack through certain mechanisms. They will attack foreign objects coming into the body. Then we have the fibrinogen. Those are proteins are helping in forming blood clotting and preventing blood loss. For the formed elements, of course, we have, as we said, we have the red blood cells, white blood cells, and the platelets. Only the red blood cells and the white blood cells are living elements. Platelets are fragments of the cells, so they are not living elements. And the white blood cells only, those are, we can consider them complete cells because they have the nucleus. Whereas the red blood cells, they don't have nuclei or other organelles. Why? They lost their nucleus to allow more room for hemoglobin or to carry more oxygen, whereas the platelets are cell fragments, so there are cells that secretes them. Okay, so the only white blood cells, we consider them as complete cells. Red blood cells are incomplete cells because they are anucleated, whereas the platelets, of course, those are not cells. Those are fragments of cells. Now, for the red blood cells or the erythrocytes, those are extremely small cells. We are talking about 7 to 8 micrometer. For a reference, a normal cell is around 45 micrometer, like a skin cell or a liver cell. This is an average size of those cells. So those are like maybe 5 times less. They have biconcave shape, which means they are flat and thin from the center like this, and that's to allow more space or more size to carry more hemoglobin, to carry more oxygen within them. Also, they are flexible, so they can squeeze themselves into very small blood capillaries, and therefore to help in gas exchanges. Okay, they will of course transport oxygen, they will transport part of the CO2, and as we said earlier, they don't have many of their organelles. Mainly they don't have the nucleus and they don't have the mitochondria, so they don't use the oxygen they are carrying for energy purposes. So they are using anaerobic respiration, so they don't consume the oxygen they are carrying. See here, for example, this is a capillary in fat tissue, and see those red blood cells, how they change their shape based on the size of the blood capillary. So in order to squeeze themselves as far as they can into the blood capillary. And yet there are blood capillaries that are too small for them, so that's where they will stop and deposit their loads into that area. Okay, the main protein of the red blood cells is hemoglobin. And hemoglobin is made out of two things. Made out of the heme group and made out of the globin, the protein. The heme group is a chemical structure, so it's not a protein. But the special about it, that it contains iron ion. It contains iron ion in the center of it. And those iron ions, this is what binds oxygen. So the oxygen will bind to the iron ion within the heme group, okay? Whereas the protein is just a chemical structure that will support the heme group. And sometimes it will carry CO2. But mainly it's to support the hemoglobin. So a hemoglobin protein is made out of 4 chains of the globin and 4 hemigroups. So each hemoglobin molecule will carry 4 oxygen atoms. Roughly each red blood cells, you are talking about like 300 million hemoglobin molecules in each red blood cell. Okay? Now, when hemoglobin binds oxygen, we will call it oxyhemoglobin. When it doesn't bind oxygen, a hemoglobin without oxygen, we'll call it deoxyhemoglobin. And when this hemoglobin or the globin part of it binds the CO2, we'll call it carboaminohemoglobin. Carboaminohemoglobin. When it binds oxygen, when hemoglobin binds oxygen, it will turn into bright red. When it binds CO2 or without the oxygen, the deoxyhemoglobin, it will turn into dark red. So the color of the blood will determine the oxygen levels in the body. Now, for the life cycle of the erythrocytes, this is something we'll call it hematobiosis. This is the process of formation of the all blood cells. And all of the blood cells, whether they are red blood cells or white blood cells, all of them are coming from the same grandmother. Okay, this grandmother or hematocytoblast, this is the stem cell that keeps dividing, giving daughter cells, and those daughter cells later will give subdaughter cells or granddaughter cells, and those granddaughter cells will commit themselves to produce one type of blood cells, whether it's white or red blood cell. So there is a lineage or commitment from those different mother cells to give certain white or red blood cell. So this is the hematobiosis. All of the red blood cells are coming from the same grandmother, but later they will commit themselves, the granddaughter will commit themselves to give those certain red blood cells. So here I don't really need you to know all of the details about this process. Just understand that all of the red blood cells are coming from the same grandmother, and there is a commitment of the daughter cells. However, what I need you to understand and be sure that you are fully aware of it, that the life cycle or the production of the red blood cells is subjected to influence of hormones coming from the kidney. And the main hormone there is erythropoietin. So erythropoietin is a hormone produced by the kidney in response to either low red blood cells count or low hemoglobin or low oxygen levels. So once we have that, the kidney, so here, once we have either low red blood cells count or low hematocrit or low hemoglobin or low oxygen levels, okay? So either one of those factors, that it will be sensed by the kidneys, and the kidneys would release erythropoietin. Erythropoietin targets the bone marrow, that is where we have the hematobiosis, and that would lead to increase the production of red blood cells, which would restore the oxygen levels or restore the count of red blood cells or count the low hemoglobin. Now, if you think of all of those, basically they are like, the end result is the same. It means like we have low oxygen in the system. Whether we have low red blood cells, it means there is less carrier for the oxygen. If we have low hemoglobin level, also it means there are less proteins to bind oxygen, or simply we have low oxygen levels because, for example, we are going up in the mountains. So for the kidney, either one of them, it means there is low oxygen levels and it will secrete erythropoietin and again to increase the red blood cells. Now those red blood cells will live around 120 days. So every 120 days we have a turnover of the red blood cells. However, this is a continuous process. That's why we don't feel it. Those worn out red blood cells or aged red blood cells will go to the spleen or to the liver, but mainly to the spleen. The spleen is the graveyard of the red blood cells. Over there, they will get stuck and they will be eaten by macrophages. And from there, their content or some of their contents will get recycled. But some of also their content need to be disposed. So mainly, of course, we are talking about hemoglobin. So let's move to here and talk about how the body gets rid of the component of the hemoglobin. So here we said we have the hemoglobin, and we said the hemoglobin is made out of two things. We have the hemigroup, or we have the protein, and then we have the hemigroup, right? And this hemigroup contains also two things. It has the iron ion and it has the hemi structure or the hemigroup itself without the iron. Now, the easy stuff is that protein, the globulin or the globin, this will get recycled because it's a protein and we can use it. The iron ion should be +2. The iron ion also will get recycled. No problem with it. We need it. Okay, so those two will get recycled. Now the problem is this hemigroup. Hemigroup, we cannot recycle it. It's a little bit like toxic group. So what's going to happen, it will be sent from the spleen, sent to liver. So this is, let's assume this is in the spleen, okay? It will be sent to the liver. In the liver, the hemigroup will be converted to bilirubin. So the bilirubin is one of the secretion of the liver is the bile, so it will get mixed with the hemigroup and it will turn it to bilirubin. Then this bilirubin will be sent to the large intestine. And in the large intestine, we have the microbes. Those microbes will turn bilirubin into stereocoblin. This stereocoblin, we will get rid of it to the feces as a toxic material. And technically, this is the material, or this is the substance responsible for the feces color. Okay, the greenish, brownish color of the feces is coming from the stereocoblin. Okay, so this is the recycling of the hemoglobin, and we said this is happening usually in this. We separate the hemoglobin. We said it's a protein. And iron ion, those will get recycled. Then we have the hemigroup to be sent to the liver, converted to bilirubin, then to the large intestine, converted to stereocoblin, and that will get secreted with feces outside the body. Now, sometimes we have problems in those erythrocytes or in those red blood cells. There are different type of diseases. The main one is anemia. This is when we have low number of red blood cells, okay, for various reasons. There are around 400 types of anemia, but in all of them we have low count of erythrocytes or low ability of those erythrocytes to carry oxygen and deliver the oxygen to the body. So there is embedded, function of those red blood cells. This anemia could be caused by blood loss, could be caused by problem in red blood cells production, could be caused by excessive destruction of red blood cells, could be caused because of iron deficiency, so various reasons. Another disorder of the erythrocyte is something called sickle cell anemia. In here we have a mutation in the globin, in the hemoglobin, in the protein, that will cause changes in the shape of the red blood cells and their low oxygen levels. So if in case of low oxygen levels, the sickle cell anemia will turn into like a half crescent, half moon, instead of being a flat. Okay, and therefore they are unable to carry enough oxygen through the body. And usually people will discover it once, for example, they travel to high places or they start to do exercises or something. They will find that they are always in short breath. So they will go and do some tests, and that's when they will discover they have sickle cell anemia. Another problem with the red blood cells is the polycythemia, which is high levels of hematocrit. This is opposite of anemia. Anemia is low level. This is high level of red blood cells. And here what's happening, the blood is becoming more thick. So it will move slowly. This of course will come with the problems with oxygen, but also would come with the problems with low blood pressure, right? So in this case, the person will not have enough blood, to get circulated through their body, maybe due to dehydration, maybe there is a problem in their hypothalamus or something that's will cause the polycythemia. Now usually there are like a mild form of polycythemia because of dehydration. This is not by itself is not a problem. It's going to be only problem when those people cannot perform some activities like going upstairs or doing like small exercises. They will feel extreme short breath. That is when it turns to a problem. So I'll stop here for this video. In the following video we'll talk about the white blood cells.